we do get a whole lot of questions on with the ModSim or the platform or 3D experience, are we doing enough development on a traditional or standalone Abaqus? And that is where I went to talk about that. I'll take about like 15 minutes in that. And this is an overwhelming list. I'm not going to go through all of it. I'm not going to bore you with that. Rather, I'll just talk about the kind of very important updates where customers have been asking for the enhancements. So for today's presentation, I'm going to cover the materials, contact, then the basic fundamentals for the CAE, what updates have been done. Cloud compute is one thing I want to highlight that I'll talk about it as well. And then in the end, every analyst in here want their results faster and yesterday, right? So I'm going to talk about the HPC or the GPU enhancements as well. So let me get started. Don't get overwhelmed by this. Means this material is available in what's new. But what I'm going to cover and capture today is the highlights. What we are doing at R&D with Abaqus. And I'll start off with the improved material models. So first one is the paperboard or cardboard material model. So like if you're familiar with it, paperboard or cardboard does have like out of plane stiffness, in plane stiffness, and then the shear stiffness as well. So now we can kind of model the material model based on the various responses, which is in plane or orthotropic, linear elasticity with plasticity and hardening. And also we can do the different yield or tension in compression, right? So here, as you can see, when you do the cardboard corrugation or implant, and that's the Dassault Systèmes logo, by the way, in the paperboard material. So now we can model that. This was available with the user subroutines, but this is now embedded into the standalone material definition. So that's our paperboard. Piezoresistivity. So that's taking into your electrical material properties into consideration with your structural or stress stiffness. So that is now included with the coupled multiphysics approach. And you can do that, or you can kind of model that as well. This one I like it specifically because we do work with rubber, and Abaqus is one of the best tools available when it comes to the hyperelastic or rubber material definition. And then we work with the kind of almost incompressible material. So when you were working with filled rubbers, so now you can include the Payne effect or Mullin's exponential softening that can be modeled within the material definition. So these are all the advanced material definitions now available just as out of box rather than using the user subroutines. So that's that. There were if you looked closely, there were multiple other onto the smooth particle hydrodynamics or the discrete element method. I'm not going to talk about that, but those are available as well. But I'm going to focus a little bit more onto the contact, right? So the next 3-4 slides, I'm going to talk about the contact enhancements. So if you're familiar with Abaqus, you can create a tie contact, which is basically or tie connections or tie restraint, which is basically bonding or fixing everything together. So that is available. But now Abaqus is well known for the contact functionality, which is mainly general contact. And you can create your models with general contact, even though if you have 150 components in your assembly. With one contact definition, it takes care of everything coming into contact with each other. So now we can also do the global bonding via general contact. So one would ask, why would I use the global bonding? Means I've been using tie and it's been working perfectly fine. Means why would I go about it? So there are certain very teeny tiny features when users are going into creating a tie contact, it gets into the hinging issue where you don't have a surface element. So now you can define that. But the next slide, I'm going to talk about, like, so if you go into the tie definition, there were certain criteria, like, let's say if you want to find out the contact pressure, if you want to put the output variable where the results, how my contacts are interacting with tie, it's not possible. But now with the cohesive contact or the global bonding, it is available. So as you can see, this is available as by default for the global bonding or global bonding. So that one way of creating your model in a pseudo effect where you are not going like surface to surface and creating contact pair. Now you can take the whole model, create the global bonding. It works a little bit better in a tie because now we are including contact, and then we can have all the outputs we want to, and then also global assignment and certain things like, if you want to change the behavior of a contact during the simulation, that is available as well. So that's just a way of kind of like, incorporating more accuracy into your model. Tie is not bad, but now you can have more access to that. And then just take a little bit.
Sorry, Nitesh, just very briefly, we've had a question from another one of the attendees, from Alimo. Can you see in the chat the question around CEL techniques?
Okay, just a second. Chat. I think I should be able to see it. Let me go down. Okay. Are there any recent updates announced a couple Eulerian Lagrangian techniques? As you know, modeling large-scale simulations such as wave forces, bridges can be extremely time-consuming due to. So with CEL, we have included like, SPH element enhancements. But as you might be aware, right, like Abaqus CFD has been deprecated, and we are incorporating everything into the cloud or 3D experience platform. So there is a limited enhancement on the CEL, but if you have specific question, we can kind of like, I can help you. It can be extremely, you're absolutely right, because with CEL, we are incorporating the Eulerian and Lagrangian approach, and there is not, as I know of, has been done on the CEL, but I can gather some information and get back to you. Okay, I'll continue with the presentation. So contact-dependent thermal convection, and then also the contact wear definition, right? So as we can see, we were able to, or it was very impossible to include the surface effect, which could be like, convection or conduction kind of like, thermal effects. So now with the enhancement, we can include the convection into the contact definition. And the other example is the contact wear. So now you can model the evolution of wear within CAE, and then you can also kind of like, look at the output for the wear definition in that, and that can be kind of like, taken into account, and you can also, just a second, you can also kind of like, output those results as well. So that's into the contact, global band bonding. And one more thing, like, no separation contact. So that was available in Abaqus explicit via the contact pair algorithm, but the way we were able to do it with utilizing or incorporating a rough friction. So what rough friction does, like, if two of those surfaces come into contact, rough kind of like, attaches those two surfaces together. So if they are sliding against each other, that's going to be hard to get the behavior out of it. So now we have defined the no separation contact in Abaqus explicit by utilizing the general contact approach. And you don't need to go into the over constraining, and you can define that. So here is a great example, like, within the heart and the valve or the inner cavity walls, if you have the no separation contact activated, it still works as like if those two surfaces are sliding against each other, then that can be modeled as well. And this is more of including the convection effects or the heat effects due to the temperature difference that can be taken into account as well. So those were like, as I said, like there are just into the contact definition, I had 10 slides, but given the 15 minutes time slot, I'm just trying to incorporate whatever is the most profit or most knowledgeable, most utilized updates. That's what I'm doing. So this one, if you are an Abaqus user, this might be a thing. Like we used to provide the PDF guides, then we changed it. You need to go to the knowledge base and then you need to download that. Now that particular PDF guide is available just via the help.3ds.com, and then you can simply download the Abaqus analysis guide. So these are the, if you are an Abaqus user, this might be like, oh yeah, I was missing that, and now that is available. So those were the enhancements onto the general R&D kind of aspect of it. Now I'm going to not talk a whole lot about CAE enhancements, but a couple of the things so when I talked about the contact-aware definition and contact-aware, that you can define as an interaction property. Just simply define the aware coefficient, and that can be post-processed into the results with the contact-aware or C-aware output. And then the other one is reading into your drawings or DSX sketch format and then creating a 3D part based on that. That is also available, CAD interoperability, and then also the APIs for your Pythons are supported where free body cuts. This one is, I would say, is one of the, if you are an Abaqus viewer user, and then if you wanted to export out the videos or animations, the couple new formats are supported. One is the MP4 format, which is widely used, so you don't need to download the VLC media player, because MP4 is much more utilized or much more famous or popular. But the other one is kind of like a very good enhancement, because we all know with the larger results file, your video or AVI file can be large. So now we can also export out a GIF format where this file space or file size is much smaller. And that way we can kind of utilize that. So that's one way of doing it. Ben talked a whole lot about 3D Experience Cloud and ModSim and all that, but I'm just gonna talk one slide into the connected workflow. I'm not gonna go into demo or any of the aspect. I'm not gonna talk about the 3D Experience Cloud, but what I'm gonna talk about the Abaqus on 3D Experience Cloud. So this is a very good feature for anybody who is using Abaqus. Right now, you are limited with the compute power, you're limited with the infrastructure, or you're limited or restrained because you don't have the resources to run the larger jobs. So we have a services called connected Abaqus workflow, where you can access the cloud. You don't need to download anything. You can upload your input files. You can utilize our resources, which you can run the jobs up to 192 cores. And as you can see, going from 48 to 192 cores, we do have high memory. I'm not gonna go through any of it. But the major thing is let's say if you're running sort on resources, and if you want to utilize DS resources for the infrastructure and hardware, that's an option by utilizing credits, tokens, or mix of it as well. And you can utilize those token pool to run the jobs on local resources as well. So if you have any of those needs where you need to get into the burst computing where you don't have resources, we can help. And this is the last piece of my presentation, is the HPC or the GPU acceleration. We are working very kind of effectively, efficiently with the linear dynamic solver. So DMP Lanczos in Abaqus is the best in class Lanczos eigensolver. And every year, I don't know how many of you are the Abaqus users on this call, but every year we come up with enhancement after enhancement, where your jobs with millions of degrees of freedom. And here, the flop is nothing but your floating point operation per second. So we are working with large models which could be the powertrain model, transmission models, body in white model, or trim model. As you can see, 28 million degrees of freedom, or 13 million degrees of freedom, or 18 million degrees of freedom. And as you can see, it could take up to days and hours. So now just utilizing with the various solver, we can run the analysis much faster, going up to 3 times and 4 times of the speed of factor. So that's just using the CPU. But I don't know how many of you are familiar with adding GPU on top of CPU. We do get if you have the NVIDIA GPUs, now you can utilize those to speed up or scale up your jobs much faster. So far we were pretty good with the eigensolvers, and then now we are going into the explicit. So this explicit GPU development is under development, and we just started our we just kind of introduced that. So if you're running an explicit simulation with large number of elements, and then if you want to utilize your CPU, then you can go about and do that. So I'm going to go into the next slide of it with some of the benchmark models. But as we can get 2 to 3 times of speed up into that with the explicit, we are talking about the 7 million degrees of freedom, 28 million degrees of freedom, 10 million degrees of freedom, and we can get up to the 2.3 times speed up. We are not increasing the number of CPUs, we are just adding a GPU along with your CPU, and then you can see the speed up factor in that. So if you have any of your needs, please reach out to Technia as your first point of contact, and then we'll work together and we can help you with speeding up your simulations with the explicit and the GPU enhancements. And also same thing with the linear dynamics and the GPU. So as you can see, we have 51 million degrees of freedom for this engine block. And then as we can see, so HPC and CPU. So just to summarize, or going back to the conclusion, I know I'm running out of time. And going back, right? So we talked about the eigensolver, we talked about the contact and constraints. You can model contact aware, you can do the global bonding, and then HPC and equation solvers, material modeling. We talked about the paperboard, or we talked about the rubber, we talked about the piezoelectric. I didn't talk about the fracture and fatigue, but if you have any of those, the adaptive remeshing is also one of them. And battery and electrification, that's a whole new subject where we are doing a whole lot of enhancements into that.